What is up, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. I am actually in the Bahamas and we got a crew. If you haven't seen the last episode, we are kind of taking off, same spot, same area. We're diving shallow today and we're actually stopped for lunch, but we got into them earlier today, so I'm gonna roll on footage and I got into a huge variety of fish. I'll see you guys out there on the water. Alright, you guys, welcome back to the voiceovers and welcome underwater. Now I'm rocking the GoPro on my head, so what you guys are seeing is exactly what I'm seeing. This day didn't take long to get after some fish, and I wanted to make sure I secured dinner, so I found this nice mutton. It's not a stud, it is a good start to the day. Now with these smaller muttons, you can dive bomb them. They're not as wise as the bigger ones, especially in this shallower area, so I just dive bombed them, chased them for just a tad, and then gave them the shaft. And now the spear that I'm using is the Nomad by Headhunter, and it is a 9-foot pole spear, and it's an absolute beast, and I highly recommend it. Normally I would not go after white margay, also known as the silver snapper, but the locals here absolutely love them, and we were going to make sure we got conch for the day, and it's a very good trade-off to give a Bahamian a silver snapper and have them clean your conch, because if you clean conch before, you know how much of a pain it is, but the Bahamians over there, they make it look so easy. So if you have a connection, a way to get the conch clean for you, I highly recommend it, and this is a good way to bargain with it, is by trading these white margates for some conch cleaning services. And I know it's not going to go to waste. We got some silver snapper, boy. That's our conch payment. When you're rocking these pole spears, when you hop in, they dangle down, and it's a good idea to keep an eye out for Spearo mackerel. That's exactly what came in on us. We just hopped in. We weren't even really on the spot, but once we hopped in, I looked at that as mackerel, and he just came booking it in. Luckily, I was somewhat ready, loaded up, darted, and these guys, when they're coming in hot, you want to charge after them, and then they'll turn just like this one did, and then you can usually get a nice shot on them. And these guys are great raw, sashimi, or grilled. The meat is super tender. Now this was a super cool dive and really unexpected. I saw what I thought was a cubera, and sure enough it was. I was not really expecting that this shallow, but I made sure I took my time. I could see he wasn't really kind of skittish, so waited for him to turn. Took kind of a longer shot than I normally would, but with the smaller cubera, luckily their skin is not as tough and their scales aren't as big, even though this guy, I really didn't get a whole lot of penetration, but that's why I'm kind of babying him. Realistically, I would grab him, pull him right into me, but I saw that the slip tip was right on the edge of the skin, so I didn't want to take a chance, especially since I haven't seen a shark, so I wouldn't just baby him on the way up. Got a hold of the fish, and once you get a hold of the fish, get your hands in the gills, you know you've secured them, and then it goes down to braining them, bleeding them, gutting them. And I highly recommend you gut this snapper. Cuberas, dog snappers, schoolmasters, they usually tend to have a bigger bloodline, so braining them is key if you want to make sure the meat has less of a bloodline and is a little bit better tasting when you consume it. Now also another perk for gutting fish is, one, it saves on ice. It makes sure your coolers don't stink of bile and guts. That's one positive, but also another positive is what's about to happen here. Gutted that snapper, gave him to the boat, and I looked down and there was a huge Spearo mackerel swimming around the guts. So I went ahead and threw my throw flasher. It almost made its way all the way to the bottom before this stud came back into it. Once I threw my throw flasher, I had my spear ready, GoPro on, loaded up, ready for him to come in on the flasher, and sure enough, he comes right into the flasher. Take a mid-body shot, and that's usually where I'm aiming on those Spearos, usually gill plate if I can, or mid-body shot. Also, always go retrieve the flasher. Luckily Spencer was right there and I had no idea, but he said there was a shark cruising around, and I guess it's a catch-22. Whenever you're gutting the fish, there's also a chance that it could bring in sharks as well as other fish, but when you're buddy diving, always good to make sure you're keeping an eye on and watching each other's backs.
Woo! That's a big boy.
Surprisingly, on this trip, there haven't really been a lot of hogfish, so I wasn't going to be extremely picky on hogfish if I saw one. I believe this trip I only shot like 2 out of 3 or 4 days of diving, which is kind of unusual. But I took a dive on this one and I saw him go into this rock, and I didn't know that he popped out this other side, and I was gonna pull him, but he was kind of a little bit stuck, so I went ahead and just went with the flow, went through this little swim through, got a hold of the fish. And again, when you get that slip tip all the way through and engaged, you can just run your hand up the line, hold the fish against the slip tip, and just swim to the surface and just pull the fish to your body to make sure sharks don't, get any funny ideas and try to take a swipe at your fish. Now this dive was almost identical as the last one. I saw a hogfish go inside this coral head. I knew there was probably some kind of cave in there, so I made a quick drop. And this is exactly where the fish went into, and most likely they'll go in there and just sit and kind of turn, face the entrance. But this guy did not. He actually just, it was a cave, and I've never been to this spot before. It was a cave, and he went in this hole, and that fish was not the original fish I saw. That was kind of a smaller hogfish. And I was waiting for the bigger one to come out, but sure enough, Spencer actually went down on the other side of this structure and took a shot and actually shot the fish that I saw go in the hole, which is great. Again, that's why we buddy dive, because you end up landing more fish than you would if you weren't.
You shot?
When Spencer and I were at the surface, he said he went into this hole and he followed a black grouper into the hole and saw the hogfish and shot him. Neither of us saw a black grouper leave the spot, so we had a good idea that it could still be in this big coral head. So I had the boat throw me a flashlight, and I was just going to look at the ins and outs of this thing. Honestly, it has a lot more hiding spots than you would think. I tried to check as many as I could. This is one of the multiple dives we took, trying to look through all the edges and all the ledges and corners and cracks of this place. We didn't find any possibility of where this grouper is hiding, and if he is in a spot, it's most likely we're not going to be able to see him, and if we did get a spear in him, it would be a nightmare to try to get him out. We just cut our losses, moved on to the next coral head, and we're just keep pecking away. Being that we saw a grouper and we didn't get a shot and we haven't really seen any grouper all day, I saw a nice yellowfin out kind of in the sand, and these give you much better opportunities than a black grouper would. And this guy, he seemed a little fired up, he seemed a little territorial, so I had a good feeling if I took my time, did a slow approach, that he would give me a shot. I saw him go under this little ledge at the edge of the reef, didn't see him come out, so I loaded up, arm is straight, and making sure once I see him, land a decent shot right there. Unfortunately, he kind of put the cable against the reef and he somehow wrenched off. Now I have my dive light, so I know I'm going to make another dive and try to extract this guy. This is the very next dive, and I'm pretty confident of which direction this grouper went. There were a couple of holes, but there was one that was extra deep. Honestly, if I didn't have a flashlight, there is zero chance I would be able to see this fish, and you'll see what I'm talking about. There was a little bit of a hole here to the left. The real hole that the fish was in was right here, and there's no way I would have been able to see that unless I stuck my head all the way in. And this guy's just staring at me. Only gave me the head-on shot, so I just took my sweet time, and I knew the fish wasn't huge, but I took that head-on shot. It was kind of slightly quartering away from me. I don't like taking the headshots, but it didn't look like he was going to give me any other look, so I just took it, and he was already wounded, so I didn't want to make sure I leave a wounded fish. Super stoked we at least got some grouper for the day.
Huh? I didn't think I was either. He was in this like far back hole. Got lucky.
I'm going to fast forward to our last day here. That we finished up that day, we had a huge variety of fish, and now we kind of had an idea of where we want to really go this last day. The weather was extremely good, so we got to places that we really wanted to go originally, but surprisingly there weren't as many fish as I thought. Again, it's one of those days where I want to make sure I secure we have fish, and normally I won't shoot Nassau's, but it seemed like everywhere I looked there were Nassau grouper. I was kind of given instruction, make sure if we get dinner, make sure if we see a Nassau, go ahead and shoot one. And this is the only Nassau I shot of the entire trip, and I probably passed on about 50 of them. He actually doesn't give me a good look. I contemplated not, swimming back and taking a shot on this guy, but I decided to go ahead and give it a go. And especially because I was using the free shaft wine sling, I figured it would be a good opportunity. But for some reason, this guy just quickly dodged the spear. I normally don't take those head-on shots, but either way, went up, gathered everything together, did a little bit of a breathe up, and I'm going to make another drop on this guy here in a second. So here goes round two, and to be honest with you guys, don't be up and down, up and down. I mean, I did well over double of what my original dive was on that last one. You don't want to push it, especially on group, like a Nassau where he's gonna hang out. He's just hanging out in the same spot. You don't want to overdo it and overexert yourself by going up and down, because that's how shallow water blackout ends up happening. So make sure you have ample surface intervals, because you're most likely going to get a shot, especially on a fish like this where I know he's not going anywhere. This is kind of his home. Landed a really good shot right through the gill plate, grabbed both sides of the spear, head up, first fish of the day, first of many on this last day. There's some crazy amazing diving that's about to come up. Now we have something really special for you guys. So here's my dad and I using the Hawaiian slings as a team together, and he's the one who really got me into spearfishing.
Go shoot it, I'll film you.
And now he's 70 years old and still getting after it. That's what I love about spearfishing. We have a level playing field. I spotted a hogfish down a little bit deeper. It's probably about 35 feet. And like I said, my dad got me into spearfishing, taught me how to free shaft Hawaiian sling, and that really led to everything that I do now. So it was really special, and I really wanted to make sure I put him on a fish. I'm excited because this guy was just chilling in this, like in the grass. He was pecking and eating something. My dad was kind of getting a little bit up current of the fish so he could make a drop on it. As he does, he ends up, instead of dive bombing him, he could have dive bombed him realistically, and he's to the right of the screen. My dad found him, and now he starts to go. I made a drop to also do some filming, and this is a long dive, and he doesn't dive all the time like he used to, but what he does is pretty impressive. So he followed that guy, and that guy was giving him the tail wag for so long, but he did a little bit of damage. I knew the fish was going to go to this little coral head, so I kept my eye on him as well as my eye on my dad, because that was kind of a long dive. I was just making sure that he was okay once he got to the surface, and now we're turning our attention to this hogfish. And realistically, I wanted him to get a shot on this fish, but I know he was pretty gassed from the dive before. I was not expecting him to have to do his first dive to be, chasing after a fish for that long. But this guy was in this hole. He popped out, and I wanted to make sure we secured the fish. And he landed a really good shot on him, but just like I said, it was a little bit far, and he was pretty gassed from that dive. But you can see my shot is right next to where my dad hit him, and not a bad shot, but just a little bit far away, not enough for penetration. But glad we got this fish. Little team effort, father-son action.
This is your fish. I see the scratch from you.
I keep rocking the Hawaiian sling, and I mainly do it because it's easy to get in and out of the boat. It's not as bulky as a pole spear, and mind you, it's really fun. It's almost, I would compare it to hunting archery, and there's sometimes that, if you know, then you know. A lot of people do archery because it's a challenge, and that's really why I'm doing it here, because I can. This area is pretty shallow, very huntable with the Hawaiian sling, and I'm after another hogfish. We saw it kind of going in and out of these caves. Spencer said there was a really big hogfish in here, but I saw this one. It was a really good one. Shot him with the shaft, and whenever you shoot him high like that, I just make sure I grab the shaft and I push it down on top of the fish, and the main goal is get your hands on the fish. The shaft is not really holding it on by much most of the time.
This is it? Maybe, I don't know. This is the only one I saw. Like this in there? Kind of, it was going in and out of the cracks. Was it bigger?
We hopped to a new area, and if you saw last episode, this is roughly in the same spot. And literally once I jumped in, the current was pumping, there were a ton of sharks around, and the muttons were absolutely everywhere. And this was literally my first dive immediately when I jumped in.
Big muttons. There's a bunch of them. Hey, there's another one that just came in, big one.
Now, I don't know if you could tell, but I was pretty excited. All of these muttons were really, really big. There was a shark off there on the corner. I think we just hit the tide in the perfect time in this cut, and the fish were just popping off everywhere. But we were limited on time because we were actually flying out this day. So we want to make sure we get good quality fish before we send it home for the day. And again, I'm just pointing off to these fish. They're absolutely everywhere. And we drifted off of the structure right here, and then I just make a blind drop in the sand because I'm still seeing muttons all around. And check out this drop and see if you can point out all these muttons coming in off of this sand.
Muttons are everywhere. Muttons are everywhere. It's insane. Look at him. Spencer, look straight down.
So I don't know if you could tell, but I was pretty excited. It's not all the time where the muttons are just stacked, and they're all really, really big. And here, those are all muttons down there in that crack. And they just keep coming in and out in waves. Whenever it's like this, it really makes you appreciate it, because there's days where it's super, super slow, and that's pretty much what it was like majority of this trip. And then we finally, just this last hour of diving, just got onto the fish thick. But again, we had to make sure we were diving very safe, because there were plenty of sharks around.
Dude, there's a black that went into that cave.
We're roughly in the same area we were on the last episode. If you haven't seen that, check it out. I was using the Hawaiian sling, and you can see why this pole spear is so much more effective than that Hawaiian sling when you're diving these type of conditions. And on the last one, we did lose some to sharks, unfortunately.
There was a nice black that went inside that cave.
You did hear me talk about a black grouper that shot into a hole, and that's kind of foreshadowing to this clip. I make a dive. We really haven't gotten a single black on this entire trip, and we were here for a couple days. And I wanted to make sure, I was kind of really specifically targeting a black on this dive. So even if I saw a mutton, I was going to really kind of just focus all my attention on the black grouper, because I know he went in this coral head somewhere. So I was going to make a quick drop. I realistically should have grabbed my flashlight, but the sun was good, so I was like, you know what, if he's popping his head out, I should be able to get a look at him. I was anticipating him going in that hole, but you couldn't really see it, but from where I was looking at, I could see he was not in there. And so at that point, I start kind of making rounds, working my way around the head, and sure enough, there he is in this hole. You can see I got a head-on shot, and the head-on shot worked earlier, and I gave it to him, and I hit right in the skull, and my slip tip just barely went in and turned and wrenched off and bent my injector rod, which kind of sucks. And we searched for this guy for quite some time.
Fucking stupid.
After taking about probably 20 minutes searching and trying to find that black grouper, and I even got my dive light to search in the holes, we didn't find him. He must have shot out, or he had a really good cave in that one coral head. So we decided to move on and go to this other coral head that it looked like a lot of muttons were kind of hanging out around. And on this dive, I don't know if you're able to see a lot of them, but there's some really, really, really big ones off in the distance. But I make the drop, and a lot of people ask, oh, when do you load your pole spear? If I see something from the surface, I'll load it at the surface. If not, if I'm just doing a blind drop, going to the bottom, that's when I'll just go to the bottom and then sit and wait. And then if I see a fish, then I'll load it up. But there were just muttons and all over in the sand on this drop. And then even on the other structure, I don't know if the GoPro picks it up, but there was some serious big muttons off on that other coral head ahead. I looked up at Spencer to see if he was above me, so I could kind of point out for him a spot for him to dive, because that other coral head is where I'm going to make a drop.
Spence! Yo! Dude, huge muttons over here. Really? There's big muttons over here too.
Now, that communication is really what you need when you're buddy diving, so you guys are fully aware of all the fish and what kind of fish are around. And Spencer made a drop and got himself a nice mutton. Also, another rule of thumb, if you're diving with a buddy and their hands are full, whether it's a fish or gear, pull out, and they have a fish in their hands, pull out your knife, give them the knife, or try to help bring their fish. Just makes things a lot more smoother in the water. This is my last drop of the day, and I made it a really good one. Got this guy lights out stone shot on my last mutton, last drop of the trip, ending on a really high note. And again, I'm so happy I could share all these dives with you guys.
bait ready to rock and roll? All right.
We came back, we filleted those fish, and I was stoked that we got to see that much life. But you guys, we're gonna send it back home. I was so excited I could bring you on this adventure. If you're new to the channel, do me a favor, subscribe, give this video that thumbs up. So until next time, I'll see you guys next week for another adventure. Later.